Record.
Okay, well, this is an interview for the Arkansas Academy of Computing, and I have with me Dr. John Talburt, and thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
And I first would like to ask you about your earlier years in computing, and could you tell us about your parents and your family heritage?
Yes, I'm a sixth generation Arkansan. I was born and reared in north central Arkansas, a little town called Batesville, Arkansas. Grew up on the White River there. My father was a businessman in the Batesville area. Did a lot of things. Started off in the state business and went into real estate and lived there for a long time. I grew up in Batesville. I went to Batesville High School. Became very interested in science and math. This was during the days of Sputnik, when the Russians had first launched their first satellite into space, and this was about 1959, 1960, and the government put a lot of money into science and math education in the schools, and even though we were in a fairly small town, we had there was a local college there. At that time, it's called Arkansas College. It's now Lyon College. And some of the professors from that college came down and taught physics and chemistry and some of the other courses in the high school. So that's kind of my background, where I'm from.
That's very interesting. Could you say that you're a good student in school?
I was a fairly good student. I was not a straight A student. I was kind of an A and B student. I did have a lot of hobbies, and in particular, like I say, this was the age of the Sputnik. While we were in high school, some of my friends and I formed a rocket club, and we built rockets and made different kinds of rocket fuel, and there were some long stretches of vacant property down along the river, down along the sandbar. And we built a bunker down there, and we would go down there and fire our rockets. And it was not too scientific, but it was a lot of fun.
How do you think that times differ then than they do from now?
Well, certainly for me, it was a very different time in that it was very much sort of a Norman Rockwell world in those days. It was a small city, and sidewalks everywhere, and everybody walked, and I walked to school, and then later rode my bike to school, and we didn't have a lot of concerns that we have now about large amounts of crime. Certainly there were, but and it was it was not a digital world back then. Everything was analog, and I remember there was the emphasis on science, and people that wanted to be scientific, and I was one of them, tried to imitate my older brothers who were in college, and I learned how to use a slide rule, and I carried a slide rule at school, and because we didn't have digital calculators at that time. So it was a non-computer world at that time when I was in high school. I never really saw or heard of computer until I went to college. I was graduated from high school in 1963, and that's when I left to go to college. And that was my first real understanding about computer. I knew they existed, but they were not a part of life like they are now.
So when would you say is the first time that you owned a computer?
Personally, owning the computer probably was, I'm trying to remember when that was, but it was much, much later, because in those days, even when I became exposed to computers, they were not something that you owned. I mean, only businesses and schools and large companies actually owned a computer. And it wasn't until the advent of personal computers, like the IBM and the TRS-80, the Radio Shack computer, that they really became available for people. But by that time I was a university professor, and so all of the computers that I used were provided through the university. And so it probably wasn't until probably almost 1990 before I actually owned a computer of my own. I actually don't even remember exactly what it was. But I was very interested in computing once I got into college. I was graduated from high school in 1963, and I came my freshman year here to the University of Arkansas. As a matter of fact, I stayed in Yoakum Hall. I don't know if the Yoakum Hall is still there or not. But I stayed in Yoakum Hall. It was almost a brand new facility then. And I came with the intention of majoring in mechanical engineering. But when I got here, and they gave me a lot of proficiency tests or interest tests, and I scored very high in mathematics. And so kind of at the last minute, I decided to major in mathematics. And they put me in right away in some advanced courses. I took advanced calculus. But I really didn't do too well my freshman year. It was my first time away from home, and they gave me a lot of advanced classes, and I had a girlfriend back in my hometown, and was very homesick. And so my grades, I didn't really do very well. I think I made a C in my calculus course, and just kind of average grade. So at the end of my freshman year, I decided to transfer to Arkansas State University.
Are you doing a hold? Technical difficulties.
Oh, okay.
Hold down the... Is it
That one.
VCT?
Okay, that's better.
Did you shut it off, or was it still recording? Sorry.
That's okay.
It's recording again.
Okay. So we were.
College.
Yes. Okay. I was talking about my college experience. That's how I got into computing, of course. In college, again, 1963. I came here as a freshman. Didn't do too well, and I transferred to Arkansas State University, which was closer to home for me. And I also got married that year. It was 1964. And we moved to Jonesboro, and I continued my undergraduate studies there in Jonesboro at Arkansas State, and still majored in mathematics and minored in physics. And very interesting story, and I want to go back and do some research myself. I believe it was my junior year. There was no computer on the campus of Arkansas State at that time, but they were going to get one. And a professor in the business school, I'd like to go back and find out what his name, he might be a good candidate for the academy, knew that the computer was coming, and he had the idea of teaching a programming course without the computer. And so it was going to be an IBM 360 Model 20, I believe. It was either Model 20 or Model 30. And they were planning to install it on campus as the main computer for the school. And so he was very entrepreneurial, and he went to IBM and he got these study books on Fortran programming. And they were the kind of books that weren't like textbooks, they were like workbooks, and it would ask you a question, it would go over a concept and ask a question, and then you would select an answer. And depending on the answer, it would send you to another page in the workbook. You know, if you didn't get the concept exactly right, it would send you to another part. And I forget what they call those kind of books. But that's what we did. It's essentially called Dry Lab. because we didn't have a computer to actually test our programs. We would write program statements and answer questions. And, but it taught me a great lesson later when I taught computing courses, because I went through that entire semester taking that course and learning about Fortran programming, but at the end of that course, even though I'd learned a lot about it, I did not understand the difference between, you know, a compiled object program and the source code, because obviously we'd never actually compiled and run any program. So I always bore that in mind when I was teaching classes and some of my students didn't get things right away about computers. I thought back to that time that I myself really didn't understand the basics of it even after my first course in computing. One thing that I did do though, which I don't know if I was the only one to do it or not, but I had actually written out a program in Fortran in this class. And the next semester, in my senior year, when the computer was actually installed, I went to the computer center and asked the director, the director of the computing center, if I could key in my program and try to run it on the computer. And he let me do it. And so I actually got to run the program. I don't remember now exactly what it did, but it was a Fortran program, and I compiled it and ran it on the computer there, even though I wasn't in any, there weren't any computing classes really offered at that time. It was only being used for administration.
It's interesting.
Yeah. So that sort of got me interested in it, but then after I was graduated from, with my bachelor's degree in mathematics, and I did much better after I went to Arkansas State, and I made the dean's list, and actually I was selected as the outstanding graduate in mathematics for that year, and that was 1967. And I decided then to go to graduate school, and I returned here to Fayetteville to enter graduate school in 1967. And I did 2 years of a master's degree in mathematics. The department chair was Dr. Jim Scroggs, who was who was inducted into the academy last year and was at our business meeting this morning. And he was the chair of the department. I worked under a number of professors there, Dr. Cassie, Dr. Kimura, and in 2 years, in 1969, I got my master's degree. And at that time, jobs were fairly plentiful, and and a lot of the people that were graduated with me at the same time were getting some good offers and going to work for IBM and other companies. And I thought, well, as long as I'm here, I'm going to stay and work on my doctoral degree, my doctorate. And I did, and my major professor was a man named Dr. Ray Cowan, who had just come here from Texas A&M. They called him the Bear. He's a very big, tall man. And that's really where I got into computing, because even though my area was mathematics and algebra, he had gotten some funding from the National Science Foundation to use computers in algebra, which was a very new thing. And computers were already being used for numerical analysis to do calculations for, you know, all kinds of calculus approximations and things like that, but no one was really using them for real symbolic programming in algebra. And since I knew a little bit of programming from my undergraduate, he asked me to be one of his students. And so I spent a lot of time in my research writing programs, and again, I was writing in Fortran, but they were symbolic algebraic manipulation programs, very unlike standard engineering kinds of problems. And I got very interested in it and got actually to be a very good programmer in Fortran, and even took some additional courses and assembler language, which is where I also met Bill Ashmore, who is another one of the inductees at our meeting last night. And he helped me quite a bit. He was working in the computer center. And so the other thing I discovered, then after I was awarded my PhD, this was now 2 years later, in 1971, that the job market had completely turned around, and there was a large recession going on at that time. And I was writing letters, trying to get a job, and was getting very little response. But I discovered that some of the people who were responding were asking me about my computing experience. And so I learned very quickly, the more that I talked about my computer work and computer experience, the more interested people were. And so by the time I'd sent out about 100 letters, I was pretty much telling everybody I was a computer expert. And I ended up taking an offer from a small school called Columbus College in Columbus, Georgia, which now is Columbus State University, but at that time it was just Columbus College. And what they asked me to do after I got down there was to help them. I was in the mathematics department, but that department wanted to start a degree program in computer science. And so that's what they hired me to do, because I had told them I knew all about computing, which I really only knew a little bit of programming, but I didn't let that stop me. So after I got there, I started doing some research and getting books from all of the book providers and learning these different kinds of program learning, how to do COBOL programming. I learned how to do RPG programming, all of these things in order to help start these classes there at Columbus College. They had at the college, the only computer